Have you ever considered the striking similarities between the ethical teachings of Jesus and the ancient Greco-Roman philosophers? This intersection of ethics and virtue is a fascinating journey that we'll embark on today. Let's focus first on their shared emphasis on living a virtuous life. Both Jesus and many Greco-Roman philosophers, particularly the Stoics, advocated for a life centered around virtue. The Stoics were firm believers in reason, duty, and living in harmony with nature. This aligns rather seamlessly with Jesus' teachings on following God's will and living a morally upright life. Now, let's delve into some of the shared values. Justice, for instance, is a cornerstone in both traditions. It's about fairness, about giving each their due, a principle that is universally acknowledged and appreciated. Compassion, another shared value, is interesting to ponder. While the Greco-Roman philosophers may not have emphasized universal love to the extent Jesus did, their teachings still encouraged empathy and understanding that we are all part of a larger whole. Self-control, or mastery over one's desires and impulses, is another virtue that bridges the two traditions. Whether it's resisting temptation in the desert or maintaining stoic calm in face of adversity, it's a value that stands the test of time. And finally, let's not forget the virtue of helping others. It's about extending a hand, about making the world a better place through acts of kindness and charity. So, what do we see when we look at these shared virtues? We see two very different traditions converging on a common goal: living a life of virtue. We see teachings that, though born centuries apart and in vastly different contexts, echo each other in their pursuit of ethical living. In essence, both traditions are a guide to living a life of virtue and integrity. They inspire us to strive for better, to seek out the good in ourselves and in others, and to live in a way that is just, compassionate, and self-controlled. A life that, above all, helps others. But how do these ancient philosophies guide us towards inner peace and happiness? This question brings us into the heart of what both Jesus and the Stoics taught about finding true contentment in life. Let's start with Jesus' teachings. His lessons often pointed towards finding joy in God and following his path. This wasn't about fleeting moments of happiness, but a deep, sustaining joy rooted in faith. It was about an inner peace that could weather any storm because it was anchored in a relationship with the divine. Jesus taught that this peace was accessible to all, regardless of their circumstances. It was a peace that passed understanding, a profound contentment that came from living in alignment with God's will. Now, let's look at the Stoics. Their philosophy also offered guidance on achieving inner peace and happiness, but their approach was a little different. Stoics focused on finding contentment through reason and accepting what one can't control. They believed that unhappiness stemmed from trying to control things outside of our control and placing too much value on external circumstances. Instead, they taught that we should focus on what we can control, our own thoughts, actions, and reactions. In doing this, we can achieve a state of tranquility, a form of happiness that remains stable regardless of what's happening around us. So on one side we have Jesus, who teaches us to find joy in God, and on the other the Stoics, who encourage us to find happiness through reason and acceptance. While these approaches may seem different on the surface, they share a common goal. They both aim to guide us towards a form of happiness that isn't swayed by external circumstances, a happiness that is steady, resilient, and enduring. Despite their different approaches, both philosophies seek a stable, unshakable form of happiness. Whether we draw from the teachings of Jesus or the wisdom of the Stoics, the pursuit of inner peace and happiness remains a timeless quest. How does reason play into these teachings, and where do they diverge? The philosophies of Socrates and Plato, pillars of Greco-Roman thought, placed a high premium on reason and critical thinking. They believed in the power of the mind to discern truth, to question, to challenge, and to ultimately shape one's understanding of reality. In contrast, Jesus' teachings are often seen as leaning more towards faith and revelation. The emphasis is on trusting in God's wisdom, accepting his will, and seeking to understand his divine revelations. It's a path that relies on the heart's conviction and the soul's assurance, rather than solely on the mind's analysis. But let's not make the mistake of thinking that Jesus' teachings are devoid of reason. Far from it. Jesus was a master storyteller, using parables, simple, relatable stories, to convey profound truths and moral lessons. These parables weren't just tales to be passively listened to. They were prompts for active thinking, for questioning, for discovering deeper meanings. They were, in essence, an invitation to engage in thoughtful discourse. Moreover, the New Testament records numerous instances of Jesus engaging in debates with various groups. He didn't shy away from intellectual challenges, he welcomed them, countering with wisdom, wit, and a depth of understanding that often left his opponents speechless. This demonstrates a clear valuing of reason and thoughtful discourse. It's important to remember that while the approaches to reason differ between these traditions, the divergence isn't as stark as it might initially appear. In the end, both traditions recognize the value of engaging the mind, of asking questions, of seeking understanding. They both acknowledge the importance of reason, albeit in different ways and to varying extents. So, while the approaches differ, both traditions acknowledge the importance of reason in some form. In the next scene, we'll delve into the paths where they notably diverge. Stay tuned. So, where do these philosophies truly part ways? Let's start with the source of morality. In the teachings of Jesus, morality is not something we deduce or reason out. Rather, it's a divine mandate, a reflection of God's will. It's about aligning our actions with the divine plan, living a life that is pleasing to God. For Jesus, morality is a spiritual pursuit. On the other hand, Greco-Roman philosophies often anchor morality in reason or in living harmoniously with nature. For instance, Stoics saw virtue as living in accordance with reason and nature. They believed that understanding the world and our place in it leads to ethical actions. For them, morality is a rational pursuit. Next, let's explore the afterlife. While some Greco-Roman philosophies contemplate the afterlife, it's not a central focus. The emphasis is more on how to live a good life here on earth, how to find peace and happiness amidst the vicissitudes of life. Contrarily, Jesus' teachings place a significant emphasis on the afterlife. However, it's not about escapism or rejecting the world. Rather, it's about living a life of virtue and love, knowing that our actions have eternal consequences. It's about storing up treasures in heaven, not on earth. Finally, we come to the universality of love. Jesus' teachings take a radical stance on love. His command to love even one's enemies is unparalleled. His call for universal love, for forgiveness, for turning the other cheek, stands out in stark contrast to the more limited compassion or justice-focused love found in many Greco-Roman philosophies. These differences highlight the unique aspects of each philosophy, providing a rich tapestry of thought on life and morality. They show us that while there are common threads, there are also diverging paths, different ways of understanding and navigating the world. And these differences, far from being a point of contention, can be a source of insight, a means of broadening our perspectives and deepening our understanding of life and morality. These differences highlight the unique aspects of each philosophy, providing a rich tapestry of thought on life and morality. So what can we conclude from this comparison? Well, it seems that both Jesus' teachings and Greco-Roman philosophies like Stoicism, Socrates, and Plato converge on several key points. They all propose a blueprint for a life steeped in virtue, advocating for justice, self-control, compassion, and a commitment to aiding others. The pursuit of inner peace and happiness is another common thread. Jesus urged us to find joy in God and His path, while Stoics recommended contentment through reason and acceptance of what lies beyond our control. This shared emphasis on internal tranquility, irrespective of external circumstances, is a testament to the universal human desire for serenity. Reason, too, holds its own in both camps, albeit in varying degrees. Jesus used parables and engaged in debates, indicating a respect for thoughtful discourse. Greco-Roman philosophers, on the other hand, placed reason on a pedestal, viewing it as a critical tool for understanding the world. However, the paths diverge when we delve deeper. The source of morality, for instance, is a point of departure. Jesus attributes morality to God's will, while Greco-Roman philosophers often root it in reason or living in harmony with nature. The focus on the afterlife also varies. While some Greco-Roman philosophies do ponder on what lies beyond the mortal coil, Jesus' teachings place greater emphasis on living a good life on earth. And let's not forget the universality of love. Jesus' call to love even one's enemies stands in contrast to some Greco-Roman philosophies that might advocate for justice or limited compassion. So, in the grand scheme of things, we see a shared interest in ethics, living a good life, and inner peace. However, the source of morality, beliefs about the afterlife, and the scope of love differ between Jesus' teachings and Greco-Roman philosophies. While these philosophies may seem worlds apart at first glance, a closer look reveals a shared pursuit of virtue, peace, and understanding.